Hi, I'm Nicholas Briggs, and this is the Sirens of Audio.
But I do so enjoy our little chats. Some may call it spitting, belching and passing wind, but to me, your every utterance is simply music to the ears.
G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who and other cult TV in the audio medium. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Philip. G'day Dwayne, g'day audiophiles.
Philip, how's things? We're in the midst of the Sylvester McCoy tour of Australia. It's well underway. How are you feeling?
Well, I think it's going fantastic in time travel ways, so hope I haven't been proven wrong, but at the moment I think it's fantastic.
You've got a smile on your face, so that's a good thing. That's always a good
well,
thing.
I mean, in the time travel wibbly-wobbly way, I'm about to drive to Melbourne in 2 days' time and kick it all off. But hopefully, all is well. Sylvester's happy in Bangkok with his son. Everything seems to be on track, and Melbourne's all organised and planned and ready to go. So, but that's already happened now for people out there.
Yeah. So the number 25 is going to come up a couple of times during the podcast today, because today we're going right back to the very beginning of Doctor Who in Big Finish. We're going to have a look at the two first stories in the monthly range, that being the Sirens of Time, the multi-Doctor story, and Phantasmagoria. But, Philip, before we get to that, do you know what?
What, Dwayne?
We have to jump down the rabbit hole.
Yay!
Let's go! All right, Philip. I just thought something a little bit different. Rather than pose a question, I might just read out a few comments that we've been receiving on our YouTube channel.
Okay, great.
And you can comment on those. See what you think. This is from Charlie Does, who commented on a rabbit hole topic that we did a little while back. And I clipped the rabbit hole topics and put them in playlists on our YouTube channel, so he picked it up that way. And this was the time where that we were talking about Doctor Who stories that we may have disliked but now have learned to love. And I was, strangely enough, season 25, The Happiness Patrol, was mine. So that was my big story of the this rabbit hole topic. But Charlie says, I cringe at the sort of fan I was in the 80s. Thank God there was no social media then. I was pretty down on Sylvester's first season, with some justification, I think. But I've come to love it. Season 25 onwards was a great return to form. Heaven bless me, I might even pop Paradise Towers on today. Build high, guys. Thanks, Charlie, for that. The Sylvester era, do you think that's an era that a lot of people are reappraising, particularly with the Blu-ray releases?
Well, it's interesting to see. I think certainly everyone's known for a long time 25 and 26 were fantastic. 24 still has issues. I still love it. I enjoy it. I love watching it.
I do.
There's not an episode. There's not a show in there that I don't like. But I think when it hit such amazing heights, and I think when you went from season 24 to Remembrance of the Daleks, and you just went, oh wow, the everything just stepped up. And I think everything in 25, 26, there's so many classics in there, and we hadn't really seen classics for a long time. I mean, there's lots of stuff in the Colin era I love, but I'm not sure there's really a classic in there. I mean, Revelation of the Dalek is good, and I enjoy his era and I enjoy his stories, but there's nothing in there that is classic. But you get to Remembrance of the Daleks, you get to Curse of Fenric, and that is two amazing top of the range classic shows in that classic era, and they're hard to beat even today. So
yeah, I guess you're right. When we talk about 80s classic stories, we go from Caves of Androzani and then we go straight to something like Remembrance or Curse of Fenric, don't we? They're the top three classics of the 80s, you would
Yeah,
say.
exactly. And Peter Davison had a lot, really. And once again, it's not something that I enjoy, but I mean, in terms of top-notch, fantastic stuff, Earthshock, Caves Under Zani, and then you jump to Sylvester McCoy. Paul Collin. I mean, I love Collin. I think he's a brilliant actor, but he wasn't served well by his scripts, and and he suffered because of that. But so where there's so many classics, when you look at Tom Baker or even John Pertwee, you could pull a lot more out. So I think it was just a big reappraisal for fans.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. All right, thanks for that. Let's move on to the next one. This was a comment that left by our friend Will Hadcroft on the show that we did with Barnaby Eaton-Jones on the Children of the Circus. He said, a fascinating conversation. I was thoroughly absorbed, intrigued by Richard Carpenter's Robin of Sherwood and how it informed later versions. Children of the Circus sounds like it might be a nice parallel to Big Finish's Greatest Show sequel, not least because Barnaby got more of the original cast back, plus Toyah Willcox. Will definitely purchase. Thanks for that, Will. And I'm glad that when people give us feedback on shows and they go out and say, well, I'm going and buying that because of your show, it gives us a sense of, a job well done, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's certainly a very different kind of production. It's certainly worth having a listen to, but it's not like a Big Finish. It's interesting when just the different creators get involved, and you feel it within Big Finish too. I mean, we talked about the John Pertwee stories from the ones Nicholas Briggs does, and then when they did the Sontaran one, and it's a different production team. You sort of, whoa, this is so different. I think when you change companies, there's the same sort of experience. It's a different production company. Oh, this is quite different, but still great stuff to offer.
Yeah, for sure. And Will also mentioned Robin of Sherwood there too. So if anyone hasn't heard that episode, I'll chuck a link for that show in the show notes because it's really good that Barnaby's come back and well, first of all, he did that final episodes that were never made and sort of did it as an audio, but then he's done some Robin of Sherwood since then for obviously not Big Finish, but he's done a great job on those. So let's move on to one more comment. How can I pronounce this name? Azuril Kirby, I think it is. Excuse me for the pronunciation. This person left a comment on my short trips reading of The Last Days by Evan Pritchard. Now, the Last Days is a First Doctor story with Ian and Barbara and Susan set on Masada, and I think this is in the very first short trips book that was ever released. So I'm pretty sure it is. I've got it sitting up there. But it wasn't ever done as an audiobook version, so I thought I'd give it a crack, and I was inspired by Kenny Smith at the time to put some sound effects through it as well. I don't know if you've heard it, Philip. Have you heard this one?
No, I must.
You haven't. I can tell by the look on your face. Okay.
Sorry, Dwayne. I'm sure it's fantastic. I love your voice.
Oh, thank you. The comment reads, I previously listened to every First Doctor story released on audio, other than the novelizations of non-missing episodes, but I was unaware of these stories read by Yol. I reckon this person might be in America writing like that. And I'm glad that you did because, holy moly, this is one of the best First Doctor stories, only behind The Witch Hunters and Farewell Great Macedon. First Doctor historical tragedies just hit different. The language used is so horrifically obscene that it's impossible not to feel the visceral horror felt by Ian. Thank you for this audiobook. Your narration is incredible and really helped this fantastic story. I know you've produced some more First Doctor audiobooks, and I'm excited to get those, and I really hope you produce more in the future. Well, thank you very much. That's nice to get comments like that.
That's fantastic, yeah.
So, yeah, I would recommend anyone get that because when he's talking about the horror, the visceral horror felt by Ian, he has to do some awful things. Did I say it was set on Masada?
No, so why don't you link that in here as well? I might even have a listen on 1.5 speed.
I will. I'll link that. And it's the story of the First Doctor and his companions stuck on at the siege of Masada. So we all know how that. If you know Masada, there was a bunch of Jewish people on top there that they, rather than be conquered by the Romans at the time, all ended up taking their lives. So it's a very, very, and the Doctor and companions, particularly Ian, are right in the middle of all that. It is a fascinating take on
Who's the
that,
Dalek?
and it's
Who
a
wrote
great
it?
pure. The name is Evan Pritchard, but I think that's a pseudonym for Rebecca Levine. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
So Rebecca Levine was an editor of the early short trips, I think, and a BBC person as well.
Oh,
So
I should have listened then.
I think that was a pseudonym she used. But yeah, I was quite impressed with myself after that one, because I usually just do the readings without any sound effects, but I got sound effects and a little bit of stinger music throughout too. So hopefully that added to the atmosphere of it. So really appreciate that comment. So on that note, we will jump up out of the rabbit hole and start talking about the stories that are the bulk of our episode today. The very first one being 25 years of Doctor Who at Big Finish. The first one was called The Sirens of Time, and I'll read the blurb. It says, Gallifrey is in a state of crisis, facing destruction at the hands of an overwhelming enemy. And the Doctor is involved in 3 different incarnations, each caught up in a deadly adventure scattered across time and space. The web of time is threatened, and someone wants the Doctor dead. The 3 incarnations of the Doctor must join together to set time back on the right track, but in doing so, will they unleash a still greater threat?
You all right? I think I've broken something. What about you?
Yes, I'm fine, thanks.
I rather think I broke your fall.
Oh, sorry.
I'll survive. Oh, can you two help me up? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
No! Careful! Careful! Oh, we're going to make a fine team with you two having to help me walk.
Fire torpedo! I'm not a delegate, I'm known as the Doctor. I'm a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, and my TARDIS was recently blown apart in a spatio-temporal explosion which I imagine is now known to you as the Kurgon Wonder. Does that cover everything?
That was a little too close for comfort.
Oh my God! Listen, Doctor! There's another one coming in!
Get down!
The Time Lords really do want me dead.
Destroy him!
The Sirens of Time, the facts and the trivia. Recorded on the 6th and 7th of March in 1999 and released in July. The Sirens of Time was by Nicholas Briggs, directed by Nicholas Briggs, sound design and music by Nicholas Briggs, produced by Gary Russell and Jason Haig-Ellery, and covered by James Arnott. It was starring Peter Davison, Colin Baker, and Sylvester McCoy as the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctor. We also get first appearances by Anthony Keach, who returned as Commander Vansel, and Michael Wade, who returned as the President. I guess everyone's first appearances, but also we have Sarah Marrett, who would return to star in the Dalek Empire series, Maggie Stables, who would return to star as the new 6th Doctor companion, Evelyn Smythe. Nicholas Briggs is doing the first of his Monsters for Big Finish, long before television series would hire him as their number 1 voice actor. And also appearing Mark Gatiss and Nicholas Pegg, so lots of famous names. Many more famous writers felt that giving the first release to Nicholas Briggs by Big Finish was a mistake, and Gary intimated that he chose him because he was both fast and trustworthy. This made Nicholas feel a bit sad about why he was chosen, but it can clearly be seen in hindsight it was an inspired choice. Nicholas Briggs was originally going to be the main director of the whole Doctor Who range, so it's not unusual he got this to direct. And he also managed to bring in people he'd worked with in the theatre who were cheap, but talented, and some of the cast fall in that category. Nick pitched the idea of a multi-Doctor story when he first had heard that Gary had got the license, or Jason had got the license, for Doctor Who for the BBC. He said it needed to be Daleks or multi-Doctor, and he pitched a sort of idea to him. By the time he'd walked home, having left Gary's kitchen, he was got a phone call saying he's got the job now. Nicholas gave each episode a title, which was never released: Knights of Felicia, Ship of Destiny, Death of Wonder, and Nexus Point. Vansel was originally named Albumin, but it was felt this was a bit of a weak name, and so Gary and Nick brainstormed together and came up with the name Vansel, which sounded far more sinister. This continues to be one of the best-selling audios that Big Finish has ever released, and that's the facts and the trivia.
Well, thank you very much for the facts and the trivia. It's a return to fine form there, Philip. Thank you very much. When I was looking through the tabs on the Big Finish website, the first the review that I came across was written by a friend of ours, Aaron Klimas, who we have managed to bump into at our events as well, and no doubt we'll see him again in Sydney in a couple of weeks' time. But I contacted Aaron and thought, and asked him if he would be willing to read his own review for us. So I'll drop that in here right now.
Hello, audiophiles. This is Aaron Klimas here, reading a review of the Sirens of Time that I wrote probably 15 or 20 years ago. This is an exciting time for me. I haven't read it since. Okay, let's go. This is one of the first audio dramas I've ever heard. I had to borrow my sister's CD player to listen to it, as I didn't own one. Well, that ages us all up. CDs. Now, the first thing that struck me was how much older Peter Davison sounded in the whole thing. Funny to think now, his voice has aged so much more than Syl's or Paul's or Colin's. Yeah, well, so everyone's aged a lot more since then. I think it was a brave decision to start off the new series with Time Lords and Presidents and things, because other than the first 2 to 3 minutes, the whole thing's very fresh. Because of the Time Lord material at the beginning, I've always put off lending this CD to friends as an introduction to the series, and normally start with releases 2, 3, or 4, which is definitely true. A lot of people, you'd sort of say, here's a Doctor Who play, and you wouldn't start off with that first one, just because it's quite heavily bound in the 6th, 7th Doctor's era, and lots of little continuity points, and I think a lot of people would feel quite lost jumping into it if they weren't very familiar with 80s Doctor Who. Okay. Also, there's a little, did you know, there are 2 versions of this with slightly different mixing, fixing up some inconsistent audio levels with the original release. I think most people found themselves riding the volume control on that. It's true, yeah, the first time I listened to it, I definitely recall going on the volume the whole time, and I think it was re-released, I've got the second release here, a little bit later on, and it's a bit of a smoother ride. And obviously we have the new version coming out very soon. It's very exciting. Okay, I don't know if it's because this is the first story or a multi-Doctor story or my first Big Finish story, but I feel it's a classic. Yeah, I'll tend to agree with that still today. It's a good one, good to put on for a spin. In fact, I think I'll do that now.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Much appreciated. Lovely to see you and have you on the podcast. We need to get you on properly, because Aaron and I have quite a connection with Big Finish. We used to talk about Big Finish years and years ago. He was like one of my first Big Finish buddies. Okay, your initial thoughts on the story, Philip. What did you think of this? Because it was your first Big Finish, wasn't it? But it wasn't mine. Mine was The Chimes of Midnight, and then I went back to this. So what were your overall impressions? Do you recall at the time what you thought?
Yeah, so my first Big Finish, I would have been in, I think it was Forbidden Planet. It was certainly in the city somewhere, one of the Doctor Who, science fiction specialist stores. I'm pretty sure it was George Street. Maybe it's called, I think it's called Forbidden Planet or Galaxies. Maybe it's the Galaxy shop. Galaxy. That's it. Hey, that's it. Galaxy on George Street. And so I went in there every week or fortnight just to see what was in and buy the Doctor Who magazines and to ponder the place. And there was this audio. And I think because Doctor Who magazine was always months behind, it hadn't come out yet that it was being released, because I think Doctor Who magazine announced it beforehand, but it hadn't filtered through to me. So the first time I saw a CD was there, it was on the counter with the 3 faces. And it took me a while to click that this was actually an audio full cast story with the 3 actors. I don't think the cover actually says that. So
it does. Or does it? It does. It has got all their names on it.
It has got all their names on it, but I don't think I don't know what I thought it was. I wasn't expecting it to be a full on play. So I sort of looked several times and questioned the person behind the counter, and he wasn't really sure. And as I read through, I saw it seemed like it was because all sealed in unopenable plastic. And I thought, oh well, I'll give it a try. And so I remember going home. Actually, no, I started listening to it on the way home because I actually had a CD Walkman that I used to hang on my belt. Boy, I was daggy back then. And
so cool.
And because I always used to play music and things when I was trying to. So I remember actually putting it into the Walkman, which if it didn't buffer properly and you walked too fast, it jumped all over the place. But listening to the first episode on the train, Sylvester McCoy, and just couldn't believe the quality. It was just fantastic. Now, I think over time, it had sort of gone down in my estimation. But coming back to it this week and listening to it again, it's a fantastic story, and I think such a great way to start. And in terms of multi-doctor stories, I mean, I adore the 3 Doctors and the 5 Doctors, the 2 Doctors. I think they're wonderful. But they all had some big problems. This, to me, was actually such a fantastic multi-Doctor story because each Doctor had their own episode and then together at the end. And listening to it again, I just thought, boy, Nicholas has done a fantastic job, and no wonder he's gone on to be such an amazing writer because it just nailed the 3 characters, it nailed the situation. There's a wonderful villain who you thought was on your side at the start. The casting is brilliant. I just loved it, and it was so exciting to listen to it again. It's been a couple of years since I last listened to it. Actually, I think the last time I listened to it would have been when I first got the Big Finish app. So I don't know how long the Big Finish app has been out for. But this was the first one I downloaded and listened to on the Big Finish app, which seemed apt at the time. What was your initial impressions? And when did you first hear it then, Dwayne?
Well, it would have been after I'd listened to... I'd borrowed some from somebody in the club, and in that pile of them, it was Chimes of Midnight and then this. So I went Chimes, straight to this. And... after the Chimes of Midnight, I think I was possibly, I don't know, I was a little bit disappointed. I guess my reaction at the time wasn't, I was just raving about it. And one of the things that really stood out to me, because I guess we can talk about the structure of it. So there's 3 episodes featuring 1 Doctor, and then in the 4th episode, they all come together. But in episode 1, it starts with the 7th Doctor. And there's a character in there called Ruthly. And for some reason, her voice, which is Maggie, I'm ashamed to say now, it's the beautiful Maggie Stables. Yeah. Her voice just grated on me. I just didn't like that character at all. And it sort of put a sour taste in my mouth. I go back and I listen to that character now, and I listen to it knowing that it's Maggie Stables and what a rich, yes, it's got such a rich history with Big Finish that it doesn't bother me in the least. And I think those scenes are actually quite funny, which I was probably trying to take my Doctor Who a bit more seriously at the time, and I wasn't appreciating the humour because there is a lot of humour in part 1. So particularly with that war criminal that's being looked after, and some of the reaction between Ruthly and him, Sandcroft, I think his name is. Very, 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 very funny stuff. But at the time, I wasn't laughing. But like you said, going back to this, the episodes just flew by, and I thought, are these shorter episodes? And I was looking at the time, thinking, no, they're not. They're half an hour each. The last episode was 40 minutes, and it just absolutely flew by. There was not a dead moment in it. So yeah, it was great to go back listening to it again. One interesting thing for me about the production side of it is that it seems to me to be more produced in the sound design for speakers rather than headphones, because I found listening in the headphones that the side-to-side stereo was really deep, whereas these days it's a lot more subtle and it's more in and out. If you're a regular Big Finish listener, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But I don't know if you picked up on that, Philip. Did you listen in the car?
I was listening in the car.
Yeah, that's what you do a lot, isn't it? Yeah, but in the headphones, there was quite a noticeable, and Aaron mentioned it in his review actually, that there may have been some sound mixing issues as well that they fixed up even for this version.
So were you listening to the CD version then? You listened to the CD for this?
No, I don't. I put it on the app.
Okay.
Yeah,
put on the app. I wasn't sure whether the app had smoothed everything down. I mean, I've got the CD upstairs. I'd be curious to have a listen to the sound quality of the CD to see how that changed too.
Yeah, and which one you had, because I don't know if it was you probably do have the one that's the original run.
I'd say I do actually,
which is interesting. Yeah, so the opening scenes set on Gallifrey. Fantastic to hear those sound effects. Van Cell we're introduced to straight away. Interesting, he carries on and pops up in various Big Finish stories all the way through to Neverland, where he
number
meets
49.
an untimely end.
Which is I was actually quite sad when they killed him off because he really was a character you loved to hate. And so
it was an interesting character, wasn't it? Because after Van Cell, Narvin, that's when Narvin came along. And so you got sort of a bit of an evolution of Van Cell throughout that first 50 stories whenever he popped up. I'm not sure. I can't remember how many stories he was in. Whether it was only those 3 or a few more. I know some of those characters and those actors.
Element and I mean,
Apocalypse Element, they all pop up again.
There's another one too. So they pop up a few times. And as I said, Van Cell was really such a well-designed character. And, Narvin was very much, oh no, we've killed off Van, so we better make another one. And then fortunately with Narvin, they really grew that character. So he became,
So Van Cell is the prototype for Narvin, basically.
But brilliantly played by Anthony Keach, who has at least a couple of bennies in the first one of the novelizations the season before. Anthony Keach is, I think, Walking to Babylon and the War one. I think Anthony Keach is in both of those.
Yeah, so you'll find with a lot of the early Big Finish that they have a company of actors who you'll hear their voices very regularly, which happens a lot. They try to avoid that so much these days, but I think it was part of its charm was to have that company of actors.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that was episode 1. That was set on a planet where the war criminal Sancroft was being kept, and there was some other aliens that were coming and trying to assassinate him at the end. And then it kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and we jump straight into episode 2, which is set on a U-boat, isn't it?
Well, eventually. The doctor ends up after being blown up by a torpedo onto a U-boat. But yes.
Well, there you go. So, and there, Mark Gatiss is doing his German, which he does a few different times, and where he likes that German accent, I think, and I've heard that a few times before. What I thought was interesting was that the doctor was speaking, and then the line from Mark Gatiss's captain said something like, "You speak German perfectly, but with an English accent." So it's interesting that the TARDIS translator will translate even with an English accent to make that doctor quintessentially British, which I really like that. So what do you think of this episode, Phil?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought as a engaging story, you had this. I can't say if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it before go listen to it before, because there's going to be spoilers in this. The fact that you have Sarah Mount's character being in each of the 4 episodes, and I didn't realize it was the same. I mean, I'm not sure I realized it was the same actress, but certainly I didn't pick up on the fact that it was going to be the same character throughout.
She got an accent in this episode.
So she was Northern, or no, I don't know. Actually, I can't remember whether it was a London accent or a North accent. But yeah, she had a very different accent, and so I didn't quite recognise her. Or if I had, I would have just assumed they were saving money by having different actors playing the same roles. So I thought that how they disguised the main villain was really well done. But each time there was just she was such a strong companion, and she was actually a lot of fun. And the fact that the translation didn't work for her, so she couldn't understand the German. And so she didn't know what the doctor was saying or the Germans were saying to each other. And so there's a little bit more confusion and more questioning there. And it's interesting when we're hearing it all, so we think we're hearing it, but she's not hearing it. So I thought that sort of interplay was great. I think I love the story love the story is a bad thing, but the Lusitania is a pretty amazing piece of history. So, as I said, spoilers. Just having it slightly changed. But for those who don't know, I mean, America made itself rich in the First World War, selling weapons to both sides, the English and the Germans. So good on them. But the Lusitania, one of the things they used to use cruise ships to smuggle their weapons to the UK to keep them safe from German ships, U-boats. And so the Lusitania was filled with weaponry. And the German U-boat, it only had 1 torpedo left. It really couldn't do much damage with 1 torpedo. But it happened to hit. They decided to fire it at the Lusitania, and it hit exactly where all the weapons were stored, and the entire ship blew to pieces. And it was in 1915, and that's what brought America into the war on the English side, because they were going to stay out of it, because they're making too much profit from both sides. And so that actually forced America into the war, dragging and screaming, a bit like Pearl Harbor dragged them into the Second World War. America sometimes likes to jump in too fast, Vietnam, for instance, or Korea, but earlier on they were always about not getting involved in anyone's war and just selling weapons. So the story of the whole Lusitania, the politics behind it, has been something I've always enjoyed and been fascinated by. So here's the story. But then, should we stop there?
So we don't find out that it is actually the Lusitania until episode 4, do we?
No, they do mention it because when they see see the large ship and they say, "Oh, it's either one of these 3 ships." But then they
Gotcha.
and it's coming right towards. It's traveling really fast. So they do say it's the Lusitania, but they don't fire the torpedo. At which point I thought, oh, that's when I clicked, something's really wrong here, because the Doctor then takes them off to go and collect the blue grate where his materials are in. So that's when I went, oh, that's interesting. But a very exciting story.
Speaking of the Doctor's blue crate, interesting that the companions are left inside for this entire adventure. So he comments on Tegan and Turlough being in the TARDIS.
Being locked out.
Whatever they were getting up to, that's where they were. So I don't know if that's ever been done before. It's a good idea. Why wouldn't the companions be trapped in there from time to time?
Yes, I think there's some stories later on with Turlough as well, where Tegan's in the TARDIS sleeping or something, and they leave her behind to have an adventure. I'm pretty sure it does. Okay. I think it does have. Well, we'll find out as we journey through. We finish now a bit more to where that happens.
Yep. Okay. So episode 3, we go forward in time into the future onto a space station. The first thing that got me was Colin Baker's voice was so young. All of the voices were so young in this. And it's amazing how if you've slowly listened throughout the years, you haven't really noticed the change in voice. But when you go back, boy, you notice, because he sounds pretty much like he did on television in this.
Well, Colin and Sylvester are about our age. They're only a couple of years older than we are now when they're doing this. Because 25 years ago, 25 years ago, I was a young thing. I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I know. That was half a lifetime ago for me. Yeah, so this is set on a space station. They're looking at the Kurgon Wonder, and they come across an alien called the Temperon. There's an android in here. It got me thinking, I wonder if this is the android, same kind of android that Nick was thinking of for Sword of Orion. Is this where the androids make their first appearance? So that got me thinking that. Don't know for sure. It's never confirmed, but a very human sort of Blade Runner-ish type android, which you get in the Sword of Orion stories and later on with the Cybermen. What I did notice was that the cranky Sixth Doctor that we're used to from television was really softened in this. So right from the outset, he was a much softer character, and I think that's one of the stipulations that Colin had for coming back and doing this, wasn't it? So that he could soften the role. So episode 3, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, once again, I enjoyed it heaps. I thought it was really well done. I think episode 3, like the previous episodes, maybe not quite so much the first one, these were so impressive because they really could have been done on a TV budget. So the things that are happening in this episode with these spaceships crashing, and it was such a huge scale that it couldn't have been realized on BBC Doctor Who back in the 90s. And even the Lusitania storyline, the sub storyline, these were bigger stories than could possibly be on TV. So you've got this amazing acting, and audio-wise, it just opened up your mind. So I think in terms of 3 distinct stories, and then on Gallifrey, which I do still picture as green, very small sets, can't help myself. But each story was actually bigger than could have been done. And so this is where audio has the power of an unlimited budget when it comes to set design and special effects. And it really worked to the max.
Yeah. I thought the sets for this really stood up.
Yeah.
Stood the test of time. Yeah. So we have the cliffhanger for this one that leads us pretty much straight into episode 4 with the meeting of the doctors. I did notice that in this episode, I think Nick was very careful to give every actor equal lines. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah,
I was kind of noticing that.
Yeah, I think it was very much equally shared out, and no one doctor was more important than any other. There was a big concern that Peter was left behind because he got injured, and so the other two sort of had to leave him behind. But even so, I think it's still the way that the characters played, and they'd been together the whole time. It would have been a bit painful. I thought the way of splitting them up a bit and really worked. And I think the way Colin and Sylvester bickered with each other. Memories of second and third Doctor were there, and it was more natural that Peter would be the peacemaker and the other two would be a bit more narky with each other. But I thought those scenes were very hilarious, and I just really enjoyed them, and just felt natural. It felt like they had actually done this before on TV. The fact that this was the first time that we'd had the multi-Doctor story since the two Doctors, and none of these guys had ever done a multi-Doctor story aside from Colin. It was really a pretty amazing piece of work.
There's a couple of interesting aliens here. The Temperon is a creature mentions it's a cousin of the Chronivore.
Yeah.
So this is where the time sirens come from, that dimension where the Chronivores exist.
And apparently, Peter, the
Temperon exists there
in
as
the
well.
audio visuals beforehand too. So they're in the audio visuals.
Yes. Yeah, and the aliens, Caldefarians, that were trying to kill Sancroft, they were also in the audio visuals as well. The Knights of Valicia wanting to get the regeneration energy of the Time Lords. It made me think of the Cybermen and the Cyberlords in the Timeless Children for some reason. I thought, is that an idea that has been pinched, or is it just collective consciousness type thing that's just got out there? But I thought of that, a similar idea, that you'll often find a lot of ideas on the TV have been done somewhere in Big Finish if you look closely enough.
I was surprised by the Knights of Valicia being really the baddies, because to me, I always think of Gareth Thomas in Dalek Empire, who's a Knight of Valicia.
Exactly.
And to me, he's a hero.
He's a good guy.
And I keep forgetting, actually, no, his roots probably aren't that good. It's just that in that story, he's become the hero. And anyone find the Daleks has to be a hero. But yeah, so it was interesting. It was really, I really had to set my mind in terms of, oh no, these are the baddies. Because Knights of Valicia always made me think of Gareth Thomas.
So we have a throwback to the Three Doctors, where the Three Doctors in this all stand around and go, contact. You know the one. How is this for a prediction when the Redux version comes out? That'll be one sound effect that is changed because they don't use the original contact sound effect. So I think I've heard that in other Big Finish productions that they have got the actual sound now. So I reckon Nick will change that sound effect and put the proper contact sound effect.
What was the proper? That was the proper contact sound effect, was it?
No, definitely not.
Okay, it's very similar.
Definitely not. No, I didn't think so.
Okay.
But apart from all that, I think it goes really quickly. This story, really nicely resolved. The timey-wimey stuff is just so easy to follow. I struggle sometimes with timey-wimey, but no trouble at all with this one. The music throughout, because Nick does the sound design and the music and the directing, so he's very hands-on with this story. But the music is minimal throughout, so it's not overbearing. It's just there to generate a mood. It's not there to be part of the story, really, in any way. And the sound effects too. So everything sounds. There's a lot of silence. There's a lot of silent space, but I think that brings out everything else. And we've talked about that in other things that like Lisa Bauman does. She plays with silence as well. I really enjoy that with this particular story. I thought of you, Philip, when we heard the doors opening on Gallifrey, that sound effect. This is the first time we hear that sound effect, which continues for every other Gallifrey appearance, and particularly the Gallifrey series. When I heard that sound effect, I thought of Gallifrey instantly. So that was cool. Maggie Stables is there in the last scene, which is cool. Where she won't be too long before she's back with the Sixth Doctor. Yeah, I enjoyed this very much. Sylvester McCoy had a lot to do, had a lot of techno babble that he needed to get out, but all the techno babble seemed to make sense and it was understandable. So yeah, overall, fantastic story. And for anyone who hasn't heard it, it's available. So I think you might be able to get it on Amazon Music. I think you can get it on Spotify. Just go and listen to it.
It's very cheap on the website. I think it's £2 or something.
Extremely cheap.
It's $5.80 in Australia, so I don't know how cheap it is over there. Can I say, this is, to me, a classic. It is such an important it was such an important part to play, that first story, and getting it right really mattered, because if they hadn't got it right, it may not have continued. We wouldn't have 25 years of Big Finish. This showed us what Big Finish was all about. Some people complain about the Time Lords and the Not Now being able to listen. I mean, I think it was mentioned in Aaron's review. But this was going to be listened to by Doctor Who fans, and they all know Gallifrey. And people who aren't Doctor Who fans, they're going to pick it up. So to me, starting off like the Three Doctors did on Gallifrey in Danger, there's lots of similarities with the Three Doctors, which I think worked to its strength, because it helped people with their minds and what was going on. This starts the range off in an absolutely brilliant way, and I can't conceive of any other way of doing it. So, as much as, for those who don't, can I say, my great resource is this book, The New Audio Adventures by Benjamin Cook. It's almost impossible to get, and there's no way. I was talking to Jason Hegg-Ellery about this in Queensland last year. He says there's no way they would release that again because people are too honest in it. And so people just told the truth and the whole truth. And in terms of, for a company to release something which is that honest, they wouldn't do it now. And so as you read through the stories, so there's a few moments you go, oh gosh. And, Nicholas Briggs was picked on in terms of it should be one of the established writers. It should be a Mark Gatiss, someone who'd written a book or a TV show. They all, Paul Cornell, they all felt they should have been given the honour of doing the first story, and Nicholas Briggs was a nobody, and yet he hit this out of the park, doing a multi-doctor story, set up the three actors, set up the range. It was the best way to do it. And so I'm so excited that we're about to get the new release of it. I'm fascinated to see what Nicholas Briggs has done in terms of the remix, the director's cut. But we'll talk to you about soon in the next couple of weeks about the remix, because I'm very excited to see what they've done. But this to me, I was hooked, and I knew from then on that no matter what happened for a little while, this was going to keep me going.
Well, let's go on to the second story that we're going to focus on now, and that is number 2 in the monthly range, Phantasmagoria. I'll read a blurb. The TARDIS takes the Doctor and Turlough to the London of 1702, where a mysterious highwayman roams the streets. A local occultist has made contact with the dead, and gentlemen of fashion are disappearing, only to find themselves in a chamber whose walls weep blood. The time travellers become enmeshed in the hideous plan of Sir Nicholas Valentine, a gambler at the mysterious Diabola Club who always seems to have a winning hand.
William? As in William and Mary, right?
So they did teach you something at Brendan, then?
I liked history.
Well, now you can watch it happen. It's the 8th of March, 1702.
My name is Nicholas Valentine.
I prithee pardon, gentlemen, but I must make free with your purses. Till next we meet, good night, gentlemen. It has been a pleasure. Ha! A pleasure for you to be robbed by Major Billy Lovemore!
If we had time, you and I could sit by the fire and natter on about mapping exterior continuums onto interior dimensions and so on and so forth.
But we don't have time.
Regrettably, no. However, for the sake of established history, that's probably no bad thing.
There have been developments. Our client reports there is something odd going on in the vicinity. Disappearances. And last night, something more.
In the name of Christ! Help me!
What is it? What ails you?
I don't know, sir. What? They're coming! They're coming for me!
We shall play another game, you and I. I'm afraid the rules are of my own making.
Phantasmagoria, the facts and the trivia. Recorded on the 26th and 27th of June in 1999 and released in October the same year. Written by Mark Gatiss, very famous in all sorts of areas now, as well as starring Doctor Who and writing lots of Doctor Who shows. At this stage, becoming famous for League of Gentlemen. Directed by Nicholas Briggs, sound design and music by Alistair Locke, who would go on to be an amazing star of Big Finish. Produced by Gary Russell and Jason Hay-Ellery, and the cover was again by James Arnott. Starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor and Mark Strickland as Turlough. Also starring Nicholas Briggs and Jez Fielder, Mark Gatiss, Stephen Wickham, who would all become fairly well-known recurring actors. But in their only plays, we also have Julia Dalkin, David Rael, and David Williams. Is that the David Williams, our famous David Williams? It is. Wow. Okay. He'd go on to big famous things as well, wouldn't he? With what's it called? Britain. Little Britain. And also appearing in Doctor Who.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. Much appreciated. So, give us your thoughts on this story. After the Sirens of Time, was this the next story you heard, or had you skipped a few, gone back to this? What's the story?
No, I started buying them in order. This came out in October, and so it was probably a couple of months later. So I'm pretty sure Sirens of Audio came out, but then this came out with about
Sirens of Time.
Yeah, no, Sirens of Audio. Sorry, that's Sirens of Time came out by itself, and this came out a couple of months later, but with a couple of other releases. So I think the next, 2 to 5 maybe were all together. So there might have been like a 3, 4, 5 month gap between me getting hold of the Sirens of Time and this one. And I know I listened to them in order because I thought that I should listen to them in order. Not that it mattered, because the range just jumped all over the place, the companions jumped all over the place. But I thought, but it made sense to go to the Fifth Doctor story. Great to hear Mark Strickland back. At the time, really enjoyed it. It didn't stand out as a huge, huge classic, but it was enjoyable. But I think that the range got stronger as it moved on. The next couple were slightly better. I remember thinking about that. Whispers of Terror, which was next to the first Colin Baker, was certainly, I enjoyed more because I thought once again there's more of an audio story. But then The Land of the Dead, when we actually went to The Land of the Dead with another Peter Davison story with Sarah Sutton, that one I thought really hit the mark well. And I think I probably would have got one more. I think I got 4 in the next block of
Fearmonger was the next one.
And the Fearmonger, and that was the highlight. So I think I was lucky because I think the four that I got next kept getting better in quality. Because the Fearmonger I still think stands out as an amazing classic. In terms of my reading now, I enjoyed it, but it's a very typical Mark Gatiss story. Mark Gatiss has a style about him. Once again, this is a historical, has historical characters in it. It has all the elements that Mark Gatiss tends to put into a story. I felt that the Doctor and Turlough weren't particularly strongly served. Turlough in particular, I felt didn't I don't think he really had a lot to do. So I think Mark Strickland did well. I think later on they write for the Doctor and Companions better. I think Mark enjoyed his characters, and he enjoyed his characters a bit more than he enjoyed Turlough, certainly, and even the Doctor a bit, because certainly the characters he creates around are excellent. There's some lovely twists in terms of body swapping, body changing, and other moments as well. There's a great sci-fi reason behind it, but it's interesting. I think if you actually looked at all the tropes in the story, we'd find all of these tropes repeated elsewhere in other Mark Gatiss stories that he's done on the Doctor Who show. So, not sure you agree with that. What about you? What did you think?
I really enjoyed it this time, and it's interesting that you talk about Turlough not being served well. In the Big Finish Companion by Richard Dinnick, it says in there that Gary Russell added a lot of lines for Turlough because he told Mark Gatiss that the companions have a tendency to be written into a room and then forgotten about, and he agreed with that. So Gary Russell actually added some extra lines for Turlough. It's interesting that the first words you hear on the CD are, "And now, the welcome return of Peter Davison to Doctor Who." So the first few CDs had that as an intro before the theme music kicked in. And did you notice who said that?
No,
line?
I don't think I even had that on the app. Who said that?
Yeah, I had it on the app.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Jez Fielder. So it was his voice doing the voiceover.
Okay.
And even on the trailers at the end, it was Jez Fielder's voice doing the voiceover for the trailers at the end as well.
Okay.
So that was I didn't realize that Jez was so involved so early.
Yep.
So it was way back at the very beginning. Another thing that I noticed about this was that the voices were so distinctly different. It's very good for that. So the casting is great because you can differentiate all the voices. Sometimes in an audio play, if there's a similar voice in there, it can be hard to make different. But all these voices, you've got Jez Fielder, you've got David Walliams, which is a very unique voice. Mark Gatiss again. So he's been in both releases so far. All those voices are different. So I really enjoyed that. Typical Fifth Doctor, which we never got too much on the TV. We never got him talking about cricket too often. I love the fact that this story opens with the Doctor and Turlough having a conversation about cricket because he's the cricket doctor. We needed more of that. So I really enjoyed that. There was a definite, with Mark Gatiss and David Walliams, a definite Little Britain and League of Gentlemen crossover. Did you ever see League of Gentlemen?
I did.
Yeah. So very interesting.
Would Little Britain be playing yet or not?
I don't think so. Maybe on the radio, because there was a radio series, or maybe the radio series came after, I'm not sure. But I think Little Britain was later. But League of Gentlemen was definitely happening.
Well, David Williams and Mark, is it Gatiss or Gatiss? I keep saying it wrong, don't I?
Gatiss.
I mean, those two would go on to major stardom. When you saw some of the people along the road of Big Finish that you look at now and just sort of think, huge stars. I see the other one is Doctor in the MC universe. Oh, it's a dreadful cat. His name. Benedict Cumberbatch.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
And David Tennant. So you look at these totally unknown actors on Big Finish who become huge stars. It's very impressive.
It's funny because David Walliams is he's been in Australia. He was in Hobart last week, actually. I was tempted to go down to Hobart and throw a copy of Phantasmagoria in his face while pretending to get one of his kids' books because that's what he was here for, touring the kids' books that he writes now. So he's very famous for that at the moment. The sound design I really loved. Once again, lots of quiet sounds. I love the ticking clock. So that kind of historical period, I love the sort of the lounge room settings with the ticking clock. And there was one scene where I think the cliffhanger might have had something to do with the ticking clock, and the sound of the clock changed, and it really served the story well. That change in I'm talking about something so minor, but it had such a big impact on me. I love ticking clocks, by the way. They're a very comforting sound. The words that were used, like my prithee pardon, because that's I would often hear that in the trailer for it too. My prithee pardon. Apparently, did you say this in the facts and trivia? I can't remember. Mark Gatiss wanted to use he did a lot of research on the language of the time and put heaps of it in. And it had to be pulled back because Gary said, I don't think anyone's going to understand what you're saying. So my prithee pardon, it's a polite request. So prithee is polite request. Do you know what these words are? Being Shakespearean, a fan of Shakespeare. There was also a term called a cock sparrow, which I wanted to look up because that's a lively, quarrelsome person. And there was a line in there saying, "Oh, you young cock sparrow." Thinking, oh, what does that mean? So it was interesting that the script had me looking into some of that language, and it would have been interesting to hear if Mark Gatiss got away with putting all that extra language in. But obviously they made the right decision. What else have we got? As far as the story goes, yeah, you're right. It was quite a good science fiction story to put in that setting. So I wouldn't see this as a historical story at all. Just the setting is historical. That's all. So yeah, really enjoyed that. Stephen Wickham, he was a voice that came to me, and I thought of you once again because he went on to have a big role in Gallifrey as well, didn't he?
He did. But I still think Stephen Wickham in terms of the Melanie Seventh Doctor story, the Volcano one, Pompeii, because he's the gladiator.
That's
that
right.
to me just stands out as, oh, wow.
That's right.
There's certain roles I just hear his voice and I imagine all these things. To me, it was interesting that people in this cast were either in lots and lots of Big Finish or this was the only one. So I just thought it was such an amazing contrast that, I thought, wow, why did some of the cast get 20 or 30 shows and all the others only got one? Interesting that happened that way.
I thought the scenes where they were playing cards too were really good, really well done for audio. Because how can you describe a card game without describing it? And if you want a masterclass on how that's done, I think listen to the card playing scenes in this because they have their conversation and the card playing is sort of intermingled in the conversation rather than just a dialogue description, which is I really enjoyed that. That was fantastic. Yeah, that's some of the things I've got to say about Phantasmagoria. You got anything else?
I enjoyed it.
Stood out to you?
I do feel the Denimore, the ending was so clearly signposted too early on, and so I knew how it was going to end because they'd really had foreshadowed that a long way beforehand. Be like Warriors of the Deep, and this is deadly to reptiles. When you come up with a line that is so obvious like that, I felt, I see how it's going to end. So that's typical Mark Gatiss. But yeah, the language is lovely. I love the harpsichord used in the music, which apparently the harpsichord had to go back and be put in because Mark didn't think the music was quite 18th century enough. He wanted a bit more of the sort of that, and Alistair went back. I think Alistair is just such a talented sound designer and musician. And he's going to go on to do amazing work in different ranges. In Blake 7 now, he has created the whole world of Blake 7 through sound design. And I love how he plays Aurak and Zen as well. No, it's a great listen. I think Sirens of... I'm so glad this wasn't the first release. The feeling was, it should be a big name like Mark Gatiss who got to release the first story. There's no way this would have had the impact that Sirens of Time had. It's not as good a story. It's not as entertaining. It only features one Doctor. Sirens of Time really shows what the range is going to become far better than this does. And so, very exciting. It's
very, very short too. If you want a short story, most of the episodes are 20 minutes. Yeah. So I think only the final episode goes for a little bit longer. But so short as well. Yeah. Well, it's been great to go back to have a look at these, being the 25th anniversary of Doctor Who on Big Finish. That only leaves us to talk about what else we've been listening to or watching. Philip, I've got a list here that says it's your turn.
Well, there you go. I'll have to go then. Today, I've been listening to The Time War, and it has such a long and complicated name, I don't think I can even get it all out. What's it called?
The Time War, Uncharted Reflections, Uncharted 1 Reflections.
And then his story title. It was just sort of, when it got to the end and they're doing the credits, I was thinking, this is silly, too many names. And it's Doctor Who, the Eighth Doctor Adventures, The Time War, Reflections, then the name of the story. I was thinking, this is getting silly. But that being said, been really, really enjoyed the stories. I love Cass.
It's good,
he's good. I think Alex is great. I think the way they just sprinkle little bits through and the through arc is subtly done, but not overwhelming. It's lovely hearing the Eighth Doctor companions from other eras coming into play the same character, because there's one character who is voiced by a previous Eighth Doctor companion in every story, which is just an interesting timey-wimey, war-y thingy to do. I'm really enjoying it. Eighth Doctor I always love. I enjoy the Time War. Often I get confused. I don't know where we are. But really enjoying this. And there were some really amazing moments. Yeah, and we need to get Kat back on the program because I'd love to talk to her about her story.
Yes.
So let's track Kat down.
That'd be nice.
So that's what I'm listening to. What about you? What have you been listening to?
Well, as far as listening goes, today I listened to the Doctor Who show's season 24 retrospective, which was really good, and I enjoyed that because we're in a Sylvester frame of mind. When you're watching this, we'll be with Sylvester in Melbourne. So yeah, lots and lots of Sylvester. But today I got a notification on my Australia Post app that I had this to collect from the post office. So very, very happy to get Doctor Who season 25. The collection on Blu-ray, and I went straight for the Happiness Patrol, and I haven't even had a chance to look at it all through, but I just flicked through just to see what some of the new special effects were and some of the changes are there. Boy, there's lots of additions that sort of add to the story, which is fantastic. Not just the special effects, but actual bits that were cut. I really enjoy that. So probably won't have too much time to watch too much of it before the weekend, but that's certainly. Having arrived today, I'm very excited about that. Just in time.
I got the post today, the 4 new Target Books novels, all based on the Shruti Gatwa series. So I'm really curious to have a read to see how they go. And I started Space Babies, and the first 2 chapters are really good. And so I'm hopeful that, there's a number of Target books that improve the TV show out of sight. And there are some Target books in the classic stories where the book is better than series. And there's, basically anything Malcolm Hulke wrote was better as a book, even though I love his TV shows, don't get me wrong. But when he wrote a novel, his novels were spectacular. And The Crusade is an amazing novel. So there are a lot of Target books which I think are better, even though I love the TV show, are better than the TV show. And so I'm being hopeful that I'm going to read some of these and go, you know what, that's even better than the TV show. And so I thought I'd start with Space Babies because it is such an awful TV show. But I'm being hopeful. It's a great cover. I'm loving the cover. All the covers are spectacular. I'm hoping that when I've read the book, as I said, the first 2 chapters are really good. And in fact, the first chapter, it's just amazing.
Is that dealing with the stepping on the butterfly and Ruby turning into that insect?
No, it starts with the prologue. So it starts with the prologue. Here is a story. You might even call it a fairy tale. Like the best fairy tales, it is funny and strange, a little bit scary. It opens with a little child walking in the dark somewhere. It doesn't matter where. It could be forever, or a cave, or a forest, or a hallway leading from a bedroom to the bathroom at night. It could be the alleyway that leads to their home. It could be an empty space at the back of their wardrobe that stretches out impossibly forever. As this little child was brought into the world, so was something else, a dark reflection of the child, an opposite. The child is given toys and buttermilk and warmth and parental love. This reflection is not. The only toys it has to play with were fashioned by itself, and they are all rough, and some of them are sharp. And as this child navigates this darkness, the reflection does too. How must the reflection feel? It must be angry, right? If you were a reflection, you would be angry. Here is the child. You can see it. You are without identity. You are only defined by the simple fact that you are not the child. So when the child has the misfortune to stand still a little too long in the shadows of a gnarled tree, or to linger outside their bedroom door for a heartbeat longer than is advisable, that is your moment. And it goes on. It's really beautifully written. And as I said, you get to the end of that prologue, I've got no idea what's going on. Because I really don't know where it's going to take it to. So
that's a Russell one, isn't it?
It's Russell's story, but Alison Rumford has done the novelisation.
Right.
So they're all. Scott Hancock has done 73 yards. So looking forward to seeing what Scott does with that, big finished person. The Treasury Road is by Esme Jakimi Pearson, who I don't know at all. Rogue was actually done by the authors who wrote the story. That's the only one that's actually been done by the authors. So I'm curious to see their take on their story. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading these and seeing what happens.
Okay.
Because
tell me all about it.
I will. But as I said, that Space Babies intro has really intrigued me. I think it's a really fascinating start to a story. So looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Very good. All right, next time on the podcast, we are going to be looking at the Stephen Noonan First Doctor Adventures? The First Doctor Adventures. And Sarah from Type 40 is going to be joining us to talk about that. And we'll see if Stephen agrees with our assessment of his work or not.
That could be. It's not like he comments or anything below.
No, never. All right, so that's next week, and looking forward. I know it's slightly in the future for us, but it's nice to be together and having a great time with Sylvester in Melbourne. And for anyone who still wants to see Sylvester, you can see him in Adelaide next week. Yep. Hobart, that's next week. 2 shows in one weekend, and then the following weekend it is Brisbane and Sydney. If you go to sirensofaudio.com, you can grab your tickets there.
Yep. And Brisbane's on the Doctor Who Extra anniversary, 23rd of November.
Yes, 23rd of November. Yeah, absolutely. All right. That's it for the episode today. Philip, it's been a pleasure to be in your company once more.
It's been a joy. Thank you, Dwayne.
We'll catch you all next time.
Everyone.
This has been the Sirens of Audio, with our review of the Sirens of Time and Phantasmagoria, with your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by Joe Kramer. Got some feedback? Send your email to sirensofaudio@gmail.com or find us on all our social media at Audio Sirens. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.